All right. Hi, Rodney. How are you?
Well, thanks, Douglas. Yeah, good to catch up with you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. You're in
Yeah.
Australia currently?
No, I'm actually in Rome. I'm an Australian citizen, but based in Rome, living and working here for a couple of years now. So really enjoying the La Dolce Vita.
Okay. Because I was going to say it would be in the middle of the night in Australia if you were there now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Australia not good, but Rome is fine. 8 p.m. or so, no problem at all.
Okay, great. How's the situation in Italy with the lockdown and COVID, and is it getting better?
Yes, yes. We're just being told now. What is it? Friday afternoon that by Monday we might be back in lockdown, which is so distressing. It's wonderful if you're a resident here in Rome. Wonderful from the idea that we've got Rome to ourselves with virtually no tourists. But of course, terrible if you're a business owner, restaurant owner, bar owner. It's awful. So, and to go back into sort of almost total lockdown, if that's what eventuates, then that's an awful situation. But they're doing what they need to do, I guess.
So, is the vaccine available there?
Starting
Starting.
where it's the roll. I'm not sure what's happening with the rollout. We're told our turn will come, but yeah, I think it's early days for the vaccine.
Well, because Italy has just been particularly hard hit by this. They were like the epicenter when this thing started a year ago. Um,
That's true.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it never
yeah.
seemed to improve. You kind of went
No,
in and out of lockdowns, but
in
more,
and out. That's right.
yeah, but more lockdown than
Yeah,
not.
that's true.
Yeah.
It's been pretty restricted for a while now. Most of the year, as you say. I mean, we work from home. It's 12 months now, so it's a significant time.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your work. You are a psychologist. Would you consider yourself a couples therapy counselor or something like that?
Well, I have a dual interest, I guess. Certainly, couples would be one of my passions, and I've written about it. I blog about it. I've done a lot of therapy for couples. But the other side, of course, is I'm actually employed full time now as a I'll call it an organisational psychologist. That's a bit of a mixed term, but I've worked for organisations looking after their staff for quite a number of years now. So I have a dual interest, and that's what I'm doing here in Rome. I'm working for a United Nations organisation, looking after their staff, and of course, as we're discussing, staff worldwide who have been in lockdown of various forms for 12 months. It takes its toll after a while.
Okay, so when you say looking after the staff, you mean to their mental health?
Mental health, their teams, they still have to do the work, obviously. So they still have deadlines to meet and teams to work in. So it certainly put pressure on them as individuals, on their families, particularly. We think of parents with young children, and the children have been in and out of school, but the parents still have to produce the work outputs. So it's an enormous challenge for families, for couples. So it's been full on, absolutely.
What are you finding with the people that you're in charge of maintaining their mental health? Is it the stress of being locked in, confined, isolation? Yeah.
So certainly, I mean, it depends on the country, of course, but the organisation I work for is worldwide. And it depends on their family circumstances too. We're concerned about the couples with young children, or school-age children, for example, that they're responsible for their educational performance. Um, we're concerned about individuals who are living alone, and in particular, a lot of international people are, they're in a new environment. Some have just arrived, for example, in Italy, and suddenly they're faced with lockdown, knowing nobody, living alone. It's boring. They can't get out. So it really depends. I mean, we know that there are significant problems worldwide, not just in my organisation, but in lots for the pressure on couples. The divorce rates are high. The domestic violence situations are significant, and it all makes perfect sense. But how to actually address it and support it is the major challenge. So my role, of course, is well, I'd say it myself, a very important role for organisations and looking after their staff, because their staff still, the work hasn't stopped. The deadlines, the outputs, the targets still haven't stopped. So they're still got to do that. But in the meantime, dealing with life that is certainly not a long way from what we consider normal.
What can you do for them to help them?
Well, firstly, it's a very good question. Firstly, it's education. We know why they're suffering, or why they're struggling. If we just take couple work, which is one of my interests, as we said, if we know why there's pressure on the couple, because I live here in Rome with my wife. I've never spent this amount of time with my wife. I mean, it just so happens that that's quite a positive thing for us. But if there are slight cracks, or if there's propensity for difficulties in the relationship, 24/7 with your spouse for 12 months is a huge challenge. So that's the first thing. We know that couples are going to struggle during this time. We know that, in fact, one of the things we know from my discussions with staff is that we're working a lot more than what we did. When, back in normal times, we'd work, 8:30, let's say, to 5 or 6 maybe at the latest, occasionally longer.
Right.
But now, because for lots of reasons, perhaps because we're bored and there's nothing, not much else to do, or we can, and so some of it, we need to remind our bosses that, hey, there has to be an off switch. There has to be there has to be family time. And so there's a lot of pressure on couples, and there's a lot of extra work being done. I don't know about everybody, but certainly a large number of staff are working a lot extra time than what they would back in the normal office days. When we're normal office, we leave at 5:30, 6 maybe. We get home. It's pretty much family time. So some still sort of report that they used to still do a bit of work in the evening, but it wasn't the norm. Well, now it's becoming the norm. So therefore, staff, employees are not sleeping so well because they're not getting that sort of downtime in the evening, which, if they're not sleeping so well, then they're waking up the next morning less refreshed, which has an impact on their mood. And so there's potential for a spiral downwards. And we're seeing that as well. So if this is a pattern, if it was, which we thought in the original days, if this is our lot for the next, few weeks, months, but it's now a year, and there's no sign of it continuing in the short term. It's no sign of it stopping in the short term. We've got it for the time being until the vaccine kicks in. So it's a lot longer than what we expected, and it's having an impact. It makes sense, but how do we support it? So first of all, there's education. Hey guys, you need to realise this is what you're going through. Here's what we know about long-term coping, and one of the key messages that I talk to staff about is taking it one day at a time. Some of your listeners, I'm sure, will be familiar with the mindfulness practice, mindfulness tells us that if we look too far into the future, am I going to get the vaccine? Is it going to work? Is it going to keep me safe? When am I going to get back to the office? If we look too far into the future, then that will stress us. And that's been the case all the way along. So the mindfulness stuff says, let's just deal with what we know. Let's deal with today, or at least for the present time. The future will take care of itself. But of course, the stressed brain doesn't like that advice, and so the stressed brain says, "Come on, give me stuff that I can really worry about." So it's a bit of a battle. So it's a constant message to our people, to all your listeners. If we allow our brain to go too far into the future, we will end up a bit of a mess. So there's a very strong requirement or recommendation that we learn to control that. Now, that's easier said than done, and I can't in our time together tonight, tell you how to do that. I would be advising your listeners, if they haven't yet, and this is a bit of an issue for them, then that the mindfulness training or meditation or relaxation, whatever you like to call it, is a really useful exercise for them to engage in. I mean, if your listeners are having difficulty sleeping, for example, then there's quite prescriptive. We can help with their sleeping. There are quite specific recommendations that we can make about how to improve sleeping. And that's, I consider sleeping one of the key indicators of their stress levels, and also indicators of their ability to cope with the current situation. So we have to be getting our good sleep. We have to be exercising. We have to be reaching out. We have to, those people who are living alone and bored and very isolated, we have to say, how can you, what supports have you got, and are you reaching them? We know, again, one of the patterns that we know is that over this 12 months or more, we stop doing what we used to do and what we know works for us. So if we take exercise, for example, I don't know how many people I've spoken to, and I ask, are you exercising? And they say, well, I used to, but I stopped. I spoke to a lady today who said exactly the same thing. I used to, but I stopped. And that is so common. What works for us generally, and what we know that all the theory tells us is good for us, we have to keep doing it. In many instances, even though we don't feel like it, many people, particularly if we start to spiral down, many people will tell us, well, I'm tired, or I don't have the energy, or, I don't have the motivation to do all these healthy things. Even though it's not easy, and it's hard to do when we're by ourselves, we have to find a way to do it even though we don't feel like it. So, and that's a really key message that I'd be giving to your listeners.
We've got about 1 minute left on the interview, and I just wanted to mention your book.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You did send us the cover. It's called Mutual Healing After the Affair. Can you give us like a 1 minute synopsis?
I can. I've spent all the time working on COVID. The 1 minute synopsis, it's actually a book. It includes a lot about how things go wrong, namely the affair. But it's also very strongly focused on couples starting out in their relationship. What assumptions do we make about what this relationship is going to look like? What makes a successful and healthy relationship? And so I spend a lot of time in the book dealing with that. But then equally, how things go wrong. And affairs, of course, is one of the instances. And that's where the title comes from. So, yeah, I'd certainly... My blog site, couple-matters.com, might be a better place to get a broader sense of the ideas that I've got in mind for assisting couples.
We do have to wrap this up. Can you give out your website?
Yeah. It's Couple Matters, but it's actually couple-matters.com. And so that's I have a lot of information ideas for couples on there, dealing with jealousy, what is a healthy relationship. I have a giveaway there on a relationship checkup type checklist. And my reference to the book as well. So if your listeners would like to explore that, I'd be very happy with that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your
My
experiences with us.